peace be upon you. The theory of evolution claims human evolved from lower organisms. But the Quran states that we are the children of Adam, whom Allah created with his own hands, and from him created his wife. Here, Muslims believing in the theory of evolution adopted varied views. Some said, let's reinterpret the verses of the Quran in accordance with the theory of evolution, and some said, we can say that the story of Adam in the Quran is symbolic, while others said, we deny the Quran and believe in science. In this episode we will use scientific research to discuss this premise, which they took for truth, that human evolution is a scientific fact. We will set the features of the correct scientific approach, aiming to be one of those about whom Allah says what can be translated as, then Allah, by his will, guided those who believed to the truth they disputed, and Allah guides whom he wills to the straight path. Quran 2:213. Stay tuned. Through their magazines, books, scientific websites, and educational lectures, the followers of the theory of evolution promote to the public that humans and animals have evolved from common ancestors that went through transitional stages of human-like organisms to finally form the modern human whom they call Homo sapiens, and that this modern human first appeared in Ethiopia about 195,000 years ago, like in this paper published in Nature in 2005. Then tens of thousands of years later, his descendants spread throughout the rest of the world. They also claim that these organisms, from which the human is supposed to have evolved, has transitional properties that fit the time range in which they were discovered. In terms of the skull's shape and size, skeleton, and genetic material, Arabs promoting the theory of evolution put these pictures as a background in their lectures. Aha, so you say that we, humans, with our current form, first appeared 195,000 years ago in Ethiopia, correct? Yes, approximately, plus or minus 5,000 years. Aha, so there is a clear sequence in human ancestors that fits the time scale of the evolutionary line? Oh yes, of course. And each fossil we find supports the sequence we assumed, even before it existed, and nothing ever escapes that frame, right? Yes, of course. Well, what about the human fossil discovered in 2017 in Morocco, which dates back to 300,000 years? According to the estimates of the specialists, they even titled it as a Moroccan fossil find rearranges Homo sapiens family tree. No problem, we will stretch back and say that the first human appeared around 300,000 years ago, as on the Smithsonian website. Okay, let's go back further. What about the fossil that was discovered in 1995 in Spain? The remains of a skull and a skeleton that were estimated to be older than 780,000 years. So it is much older than the alleged 300,000 years, meaning that humans appeared before the semi-humans, which humans were supposed to have evolved from. Juan Arswiger, who discovered the skull, even said, "It is so surprising. We must rethink human evolution to fit that face." The Grandalina face is 800,000 years old and yet distinctively ours. It is almost that of a modern human. They were not sure how to explain it, so they decided to consider it a semi-human being, and they called it Homo antecessor, and they unleashed their imagination to make it look primitive, like this statue in the Australian Museum. Yet the uncertainty about explaining it persisted, and Nature journal later published a study reasserting that the face of what they called Homo antecessor is similar to that of modern humans, and Science journal talked about the confusion surrounding its placement in the evolutionary sequence. Regardless of how you explain this difference of hundreds of thousands of years, what will you do with the skull discovered in Kenya in 2001? They named it the flat-faced man of Kenya, and they estimated the age of the skull to be 3.5 million years. An article in Nature journal even expressed it its great shock by it, saying, "The evolutionary history of humans is complex and unresolved. It now looks set to be thrown into further confusion by the discovery of another species and genus dated to 3.5 million years ago." Science Journal also published an article titled, "Skull Further Obscures Human Origins." It starts with the discovery of 3.5 million years old hominoid skull and other fossil remains in northern Kenya. That Kenyanthropus will complicate efforts to trace the convoluted course of human evolution. Unanimous. Whereas the words of the Arab evolution promoters misleadingly imply that the experts are unanimous on a clear sequence of human evolution. By the way, the Darwinians ultimately did not classify this fossil as part of the human race, but they are confused since its characteristics do not fit this time range according to the alleged evolutionary line. Darwinians hardly recovered from this slap in 2001. When another slap hit them in 2002 with the discovery of skulls in Chad they named Taumai. Their age was estimated to be 6 to 7 million years, as published in Nature, and their characteristics don't fit this time range, according to this alleged evolutionary line, as their proximity to human skulls qualifies them to have supposedly appeared relatively late. So, if they accept that they are 6-7 million years old, it won't be acceptable to assume that many species which came after Taumai are ancestors of humans and belong to the same evolutionary lineage, because these species are less similar to the contemporary human skull than Taumai, meaning that the older race can't be closer to the human than the intermediate race. This article in Nature even said, Taumai is the tip of that iceberg, one that could sink our current ideas about human evolution. The anthropologist Bernard Wood also said, "When I went to medical school in 1963, the human evolution looked like a ladder." The article then comments, "Now human evolution looks like a bush. How the fossils are related to each other, and which, if any of them, are human forebears, is still debated." Note again, this is from an article in Nature, one of the most famous international journals, and the most supportive to the myth of evolution. How they are related to each other, and which, if any of them, are human forebears, is still debated. Therefore, dear viewer, when someone shows you comic sketches like these, which display human evolution in a straight line, know that he did not update his information since 1963. Since the days Bernard Wood went to medical school. Then, in 2005, Nature published an article saying, "Until a few years ago, the evolutionary history of our species was thought to be reasonably straightforward." Then it says, "But lately, confusion has been sown in the human evolutionary tree." The article continued to explain the discoveries that caused this confusion. Then, in 2015, modern human-like hand bones were discovered in Tanzania, which confused them even more, because it was estimated to be more than 1.84 million years old, as published in Nature. In the same year, in 2015, a fossil was unearthed in Ethiopia with characteristics that don't fit the alleged evolutionary line, and Nature published about it. The anthropology professor Colin Groves commented on it saying, "We just don't know how many species there were from the alleged human ancestors, which belong to which." He also said about this fossil that it really upsets the apple cart, like an apple cart was turned upside down. But maybe the picture got clearer in the last 3 years. On the contrary, many confusing discoveries were made. Even the BBC science editor Paul Rinken commented in the article published on the 2nd of April, 2020, saying, "We once thought of human evolution as a linear progression, with modern humans emerging at the end as the pinnacle of evolutionary development. But everywhere we look, it's increasingly clear the real picture was much messier." For a long time, Darwinians were certain that the first human appeared in Ethiopia, and they drew the story of his lineage spreading through other parts of the world. Yet this certainty completely scattered following these discoveries that appeared in Morocco, Kenya, Chad, and Tanzania. They said, then let's say that the human origin was in Africa in general, as all these countries are in Africa. In Africa, what do you say then about these fossils in China? that were published about in 2017. New Scientist said about them, bizarre fossils from China are revealing our species' Asian origins and rewriting the story of human evolution. China, no problem. True that it isn't in the same continent as Ethiopia, but at least it's from the same planet. This is an article published in 2020 titled, "Recent Discoveries Have Overhauled Our Picture of Where Humans Came From and When." It says, "Who we are and where we came from were wrong. All these are studies and statements of evolutionists and from their most famous journals, and this is the reality of the human evolutionary scenarios, strewn, sunken, confusing, convoluted, complex, obscure, messy, with shaky roots, like an upturned apple cart." According to evolutionists themselves, their expressions make me visualize followers of the evolution myth running, just like the imaginary beings they claimed, running aimlessly after the delusion of their myth. What else can they do when each human evolutionary line keeps collapsing with each new discovery? They resorted to drawing branched trees, so that whenever a new fossil is discovered, they would just draw a new branch and put the fossil on it. As simple as that. They avoid drawing a direct link between one being and the other, which is a sidestep we seriously need to consider. It means that the fossils that ruined their previous fantasies, and they expressed their annoyance by, are being added by them somewhere on the tree. When you look, you see many names and numerous imaginary faces, so you think that these are all evidence for human evolution, when they are the exact opposite. Thus, they turned evidence which destroys evolution to one that supports it, a method of theirs we gave many examples for. These trees differ from one site to another depending to their imagination, as in these pictures from Human Origins, Nature, Science, the well-known Earth magazine, the British Encyclopedia Britannica, the Australian Museum website, and others. What does phylogenetics mean? For example, they say that humans and chimpanzees have evolved from a common ancestor. So some people assume that this common ancestor is a being well known to them, with discovered fossils that prove its historical existence. Not at all. It is the imaginary being A. According to nature, they assumed its existence and gave it a name HCLCA, the last common ancestor between the human and chimpanzee. Is there any scientific evidence for it? Any information about it? Not at all. Rather, evolution necessitated inventing its existence. This is despite a paper published in Science Advances, a journal of science, which opened with "Human brains are 3 times larger, are organized differently, and mature for a longer period of time than those of our closest living relatives, the chimpanzees. Together these characteristics are important for human cognition and social behavior, but these evolutionary origins remain unclear. Thus, humans are vastly different from chimpanzees. How evolution did that is unknown, and the common ancestor between humans and chimpanzees is unknown. It's only key that it evolved, that's it. The Ardi fossil from the family Ardipithecus, or the Lucy fossil from the family Australopithecus, were previously considered human ancestor and icons of human development. Yet now they avoid drawing a direct link between them and the human or claiming that they are human ancestors. Rather, they claim that it and other ancestors may have branched out of some common origin as mentioned in science, and all these numbers you see are evolutionary beings hypothesized to have occurred. Their trees thus became bunches of isolated nests, linked only by fantasied origins without any proof. That's why they now frequently avoid the word human ancestors and instead use relatives. There is some relationship. How, when, what's the evidence? We don't know, but there must be some kind of relationship. Now, viewers, that we showed you how recent discoveries scrambled the alleged evolutionary line. Let's now show you how the elements of these lines or these trees, what they used to call icons of evolution. These fossils, which irrefutably indicate that evolution occurred, how they have nothing to do with an evolutionary mutation, transitional beings, or humanoids whatsoever. Rather, we simply have fossils of apes and fossils of humans. The apes' fossils are of apes with various forms, but they are still apes, and the fossils they claimed to be for semi-humans are of humans, with variations just like those found in current humans. We also have parts of skulls and skeletons that cannot be confidently attributed to humans, apes, or others. Yet stories and drawings are built on them with mere imaginations and delusions. Like the donkey skull and the pig tooth, they could even be for extinct organisms. We are here talking about apes, and there is a difference between them and monkeys, but both terms are translated to the same word in Arabic. Darwinians claim that we So let's take the story of the icons of evolution. Let's take this evolutionary line that still exists to this day in August 2020 on the British Encyclopedia site titled The Human Lineage. First to Australopithecus afarensis, the southern ape of Africa, whose most famous fossil was named Lucy. What many people don't know is that Lucy is a collection of scattered bones found at the foot of a hill subjected to rainstorms. These bones weren't connected together, but collected over a span of 3 weeks. A jaw from here, a femur from there. Weeks later a vertebra from another location, and so on. The researchers concluded that these bones belong to the same being, as mentioned in the book Lucy, The Beginnings of Humankind, by the paleontologist Donald Johanson, as well as on the Arizona University website. These bones may or may not belong to the same being, yet they assumed that they belong to the same being, and that they adopt transitional features between humans and apes. The followers of the evolution myth let their imagination run wild, based on these bones, to draw an enormous amount of paintings and statues in museums, documentaries, and school and university books. They created pictures of it that would make you feel nostalgic towards your alleged first mother. They published documentaries and programs about how Lucy died, making its existence an accepted fact and leaving no space for questions except about the details of her life, such that when you hear Lucy, you'd imagine that they excavated this fully fledged fleshy mummified fossil with a 3 million years old video showing the details of Lucy's life, whereas in reality they are nothing but scattered bones, highly doubted to have belonged to the same being. What many do not know is that the myths media overlooked many studies that question numerous particulars about the early deductions built on Lucy, as well as studies that completely deny that Lucy and her afarensis family of apes are human ancestors. Even the French magazine Science and Vie titled the cover of its May 1999 edition, "Goodbye Lucy." The article mentioned the evidence that the entire Australopithecus family, to which Lucy belongs, must be removed from the human family tree. In 2007, the well-known American journal PNAS published an article that demonstrates the reasons for suspecting that the afarensis, to which Lucy belongs, are human ancestor. In April 2020, Science Advances published a paper that focused on Lucy's skull and a group of skulls belonging to the afarensis apes to determine the shape of the brain. The researchers said in the conclusion, contrary to previous claims, skull imprints reveal an ape-like brain organization and no features derived toward humans, meaning it is not transitional at all. Many other studies deny that the afarensis apes, including Lucy, are human ancestors. Scientific journals started drawing them branched, as if they have some common ancestor with humans, as we saw in Nature and Science. Yet university and school textbooks, scientific websites, and Arab intellects still use it as an icon of human evolution. Next, second Homo habilis, or what they call handyman, and claim to be a semi-human being, one of the transitional forms between southern apes and the modern human. Once again, what they found is not this being, but bones based on which they unleashed their imagination. The Science journal published in 1999 a study showing that the properties of these fossils, previously classified as semi-human, are typical of southern apes. Thus it should be removed from the Homo classification. The alleged semi-humans. Then in 2000, the Molecular Biology and Evolution journal published a study that denies the validity of Homo habilis as an intermediate link between southern apes and humans, although this belief prevailed for 30 years as the paper states. Then, in 2011, Science published a research titled, "Who was Homo habilis and was it really Homo?" The first sentence in the paper says, "In the past decade, Homo habilis' status as the first member of our genus has been undermined." Then the paper discussed the similarity between Homo habilis and the southern apes. Decades of research denying the idea of this semi-human. Yet its pictures still go around as an icon for human evolution. Next, third, Homo erectus, also known as the upright man, and they claim that it is semi-human. They consider this alleged being pivotal and important in evolution. Many are affiliated by some with the alleged Homo erectus, as in this study in Science. Is it really an icon of evolution and an irrefutable evidence? This is a paper published in the German-English journal Kurierforschungsinstitut in 1994, titled "The Case for Sinking Homo erectus, meaning revoking its idea." The researchers, who are from America, Australia, China, and the Czech Republic, say there is no distinct boundary between Homo erectus and the Homo sapiens in time or space. There is no speciation involved in the emergence of Homo sapiens from Homo erectus. These reasons combine to require that the lineage be regarded as a single evolutionary species. This is another study published in Nature discussing the possibility of classifying Homo erectus as a race from our known human species, meaning it is not a transitional phase whatsoever. Someone may say, wait a moment, did these studies settle the issue, or were there other studies that countered them? Did the evolutionists agree to remove Homo erectus, for example, from the course of human evolution? We say, dear viewers, these Darwinians hardly agree on anything. Rather, they contradict each other and ridicule one another. They only agree on one thing: denying creation. This article on the Darwinian site Live Science talks about the Darwinians' dispute concerning the Homo erectus, saying, "The lineage and evolutionary history of Homo erectus and other Homo species is unclear and has been muddied further by recent finds." Muddied further, mucky, a complete mess, a total disaster. The article then uses phrases like, "There's much disagreement," "confusing matters more," "Scientists also don't agree." So yes, there is a controversy over everything. The studies we present to you, which undermine the evolution icons, are from the most highly ranked journals like PNAS, Science, and Nature, while Arabs promoting evolution delude you into thinking that the whole scenario is complete. The evidence is established, and the scientists unanimously agree. Next, fourth, Neanderthals. In the episode The Pancake Theory, we presented to you this scientific paper, which conducted a comprehensive review for 151 studies about Neanderthals. The paper established that they are in no way lower than us. They are not stupid, barbaric ancestors of humans as previously claimed. This became acceptable to most Darwinians, and many studies were published about it. A more recent one was a genetic research published in 2020, which shows that the genetic differences in the mitochondria between Neanderthals and modern humans are less than the differences between polar bears and brown bears, and that there was mating between the known human and the Neanderthal. In conclusion, Australopithecus afarensis are like the southern apes. They have no transitional characteristics to humans. What was named Homo habilis is also not a semi-human, but rather appears to belong to the southern apes, and all that was previously claimed to be semi-human other than those are in fact humans. The differences between them and the skeletons of humans that they are being compared to are similar or close to the differences between the current humans races. Thus, you see again why the human evolutionary scenarios are strewn, sunken, muddled, loopy, complex, obscure, chaotic, have shaky roots, and upset the apple cart. You see now why these fictional, stupid drawings have no value. Mere deception, misguidance, and quackery of pseudoscience, which university and school books, as well as many foreign and Arabic science-simplified websites sleep on for decades, just like they slept on the lie that the hind bones in whales are useless. As we explained in the episode Wakey Wakey, or Haeckel's embryo drawings as we showed in the episode Tarzan. All the studies we have cited, dear viewers, were done by Darwinians, yet none of the authors would acknowledge the fall of the human evolution myth, as every time one of their icons falls they would say, "It does not matter, there are so many other proofs for evolution," as we showed in the episode Tarzan. The alternative, which is a wisdom-based creation, is rejected in advance and unthinkable. We are putting together the complete picture which they do not acknowledge, to reveal their confusion, and that they don't even think of getting outside the box of blind Darwinian belief. They have committed themselves to finding some alternative story to creation. So the scenario has to be rewritten as they themselves state, and they have to draw useless trees and fruits, and let their imagination run wild with myths. They'd do anything but acknowledging the existence of a creator. Ernst Mayr from Harvard University. The earliest fossils of Homo humans and alleged semi-humans, Homo rudolfensis and Homo erectus, are separated from Australopithecus by a large, unbridged gap. How can we explain this seeming siltation? Not having any fossils that can serve as missing links, we have to fall back on the time-honored method of historical science, the construction of a historical narrative. Construction of a historical narrative means inventing some story to bridge the gap, then waiting to see if any evidence would be discovered that contradict it. Hence, much of what the Darwinians present is nothing but historical narratives to fill gaps. No wonder, as Mayr himself says, indeed evolutionary biology as a science, in many respects, is more similar to the Geisteswissenschaften humanities than exact sciences. They confined the definition of knowledge to experimental observational science, and denied the unseen because it is not in the domain of science. Then, when they failed to explain creation through it, they started resorting to virtual unseens that have no evidence from observation, experimentation, reason, or innate nature. All this, and we do not want to repeat how absurd it is to construct an entire being and make films and documentaries about it based on parts of a skull or scattered bones, as we've previously shown in the scandal of drawing the semi-human of Nebraska based on a molar, publishing a paper about it in Science, then the same journal publishing another paper years later that this tooth belongs to a pig, not a semi-human. Here is a very, 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 very important issue. All that has been mentioned is not what's most important in this matter. That is, even if they found fossils of beings with common characteristics, what is the scientific proof that we have evolved from them? This is a very important matter, dear viewers, because we often get lost in the details. One might think, for example, that if there is evidence that Lucy had common characteristics, then this proves that we evolved from it, as if the argument over a particular fossil, if ever settled, would be in favor of or against the evolution of humans. Certainly not. We must not drown in the details and lose the overall picture. The myth followers would say, there are hidden things only the specialists know, like the gradual sequence in the genetic material. We say this is also untrue. This research in the Molecular Biology and Evolution Journal shows that there are huge genetic differences between the human race and the southern apes that do not support slow gradual evolution, and that there is a combination of attributes which appeared suddenly that weren't there before. What explanation do you have then? They said there was a genetic revolution, which is a seemingly scientific term for a comical idea which we talked about. In short, the idea is that too many random changes happened harmoniously, without ruining the rest of the genetic material, to give the being sublime qualities that transformed it into the human race, and all that happened by coincidence. Then why would you trouble yourself with inventing the idea of genetic revolution, or what some call rapid evolution? What right do you have to assume that humans evolved from lower beings even though fossils don't support your claims, and even though mankind is hugely different in its characteristics and genes from other beings? Well, mankind must have evolved from something. Why? So that the scientific explanation is complete. Lower organisms have evolved from others, and these, in turn, evolved from the primitive cell which somehow originated by chance. Ahar. So human evolution from others is a prejudice, which you wield discoveries to support and disguise as science. It is not our scientific conclusion driven by scientific evidence. Well, what is the alternative to mankind evolving from lower organisms? That Allah created mankind independently out of knowledge and will. This isn't a scientific explanation. Define a scientific explanation. It is what can be observed, experimented, and reproduced. And is the evolution of mankind from lower organisms, something that you observed, experimented, or reproduced. We showed earlier that the first emergence of organisms is an unseen event that cannot be subjected to sense or experimentation. Therefore, it's not within the scope of observational experimental science, nor within its jurisdiction. Hence, searching for evidence from science to explain the first emergence of beings employs the wrong tool for deduction. We explained in episodes 49, 51, and 52 of the Journey of Certainty. It's something that can't be observed, experimented, or reproduced. Thus, the evidence must be from knowledge-based testimony, informing us about this time which is unseen to us. You might say, I haven't yet proved the validity of the Qur'an and Sunnah, and you did not prove that to me. True, but until we get to that stage of the journey of certainty, do not tell me that human evolution is knowledge supported by scientific evidence. It is rather a blind belief in fantasized interpretations, embedded deeply into history. That's all. There is another very, very important thing, that the transformation of one being into another must implicitly assume that there is someone planning this transformation, intentionally and willingly, because coincidental evolution with no intention or purpose does not transform a being into another, even if the earth and sky were filled with random attempts, as we explained in details in the episode addressed them as children, where we explained what a small change in the same organism, like the elongation of the giraffe's neck, would require, and linked that to the example of children striking keyboards randomly, and the simultaneous changes needed in the word files without corrupting the original paragraphs. We also showed in the episode Who Stole the Million that even if we get past that, the Earth's crust would be full of fossils of these supposed transitional forms, along with the fossils of the failed organisms that resulted from the random changes. These are two crucial episodes in demonstrating the absurdity of the idea of one being transforming into another by chance, through random changes and blind selection, as well as the silliness of celebrating a fossil as an evidence of evolution, and that terms such as transitional forms and intermediate link are all misleading terms because they are based on intent and will to transform one being to another, while evolutionists deny intent and will. All this, dear viewers, and we did not talk about the comedy of dealing with these estimates of the organism's ages by millions of years, as if they were sacred numbers with a high degree of accuracy. However, one example suffices. Around 1992, they found a fossil in Ethiopia, and after 17 years, the media exaggerated this discovery. Science Journal made it the subject of its cover with the title, Breakthrough of the Year Ardipithecus ramidus, and it was later known as Ardi. Science published an article about it, as well as National Geographic under the title, Oldest Skeleton of Human Ancestor Found, and they placed it on this alleged evolutionary line 4.4 million year old. To be honest, it's 4.387 plus or minus 0.031 million years according to nature, within a time scale that is convenient for human evolution. But soon after, in the following year, Science published an article questioning the evidence that Ardi is an ancestor of humans, and Time published an interview with a specialist who revealed that the claimants used unscientific methods to pass their claim. Nature also published a study opposing the claim that Ardi is a human ancestor. The point is, I put an effort into going back to the paper where they mentioned the estimated age of Ardi in Nature to find that the researchers estimated its age according to the sedimentary layers in which it was located. They said most of the feldspar grains separated for these analysis are contaminated, yielding an early Miocene age tilde 23.5 million years. One sample sample, although also contaminated, provided a mean age of 4.387 million years. This age is viewed as the best estimate for the age of the sample, and thus provides a maximum age for the hominid remains. The remaining 9 grains from this sample represent contaminants, dated to 23.6 million years. That easy. We think that 4.4 million years is more fitting, and we exclude the 23.6 million year samples. Although we admit that both samples are contaminated, the RD fossil could be 4.4 million years old, or it could be 23.6 million years, so about 5 times more. It could be more and it could be less. In the comments, we will provide links to articles that show how comical the idea of considering these estimates in millions and billions of years to be accurate numbers. This is the reality of the scientific evidence for human evolution. You might say no, it's not only fossils, there is genetic evidence. Humans' genetic material is 98.8% similar to that of a chimpanzee. We explained the invalidity of these claims with Dear viewers, we have explained through dozens of episodes the invalidity of the evolution theory from its roots with scientific detail. We explained the invalidity of its principles and the methods used by its followers to promote it to people. Those who did not see the previous episodes need to know that what we are presenting today is only a small part of a long, detailed discussion. This is then the reality of the scientific evidence for human evolution from lower organisms. 1. Scenarios nulled by recent discoveries that they became strewn, sunken, with shaky roots according to statements from evolutionists themselves. 2. Icons of these scenarios are refuted, one by one, without exception. 3. Evidence that exploits photoshopped fantasies and Hollywood movies based on scattered bones. 4. Prejudiced assumption that humans evolve from other organisms without scientific proof. 5. Built on attempts to deny the idea of creation at any cost. 6. And using the wrong deduction methods for the unseen. 7. It ignores the consequences of chance and purposelessness, which cannot transform a being to another. And 8. Ignores the great inaccuracies in the age of fossils. Darkness upon darkness. If one stretches out their hand, they can hardly see it. And whoever Allah does not bless with light will have no light. QTM 2440, a blind Darwinian creed. Let's see now, dear viewers, how some Arab speakers deal with this topic. Allow me first to emphasize one thing. I'd like to believe that the first 3 people whom I will quote here didn't intentionally contradict the truth in this matter, but they didn't exert enough effort to reach the truth and therefore missed it. I reached out to them one by one, asking for a discussion out of respect for our common affiliation to Islam. Some of them responded politely and kindly refused to discuss at the moment, while others chose not to respond at all, but to resort to defamation and slander. Let them all excuse me that I had to discuss this publicly, as the mistakes they publicly made about this topic were huge and have detrimental effects. Nevertheless, I ask Allah to guide us all to what He pleases. I ask my dear viewers to try to influence the mentioned people by advice and reminders, not by attacking or insulting them. Dr. Nidal Kasum, in an episode from his program Contemplate with Me titled The Theory of Evolution and Its Scientific Evidence, says, they say, where are these missing links between them? Where are these races, skeletons, that you say exist between the human and the ancient monkey? Show me evidence that a human was something before becoming a human, and that he really descended from apes or great apes, as they sometimes call them. We have a vast number of these types of fossils. Believe it or not, we find that these skulls range in age between about 2 million years to the most recent, probably a third of a million years, 300,000 years. In fact, when we come to each one of these 6 and look at the size and age, we find that they are really sequencing from the oldest to the newest, as they draw closer to humans. Excuse me, doctor. These evolutionists' claims are very old, from 1963 as we showed. I really don't know where you get your information from, especially since you don't put references for each piece of information. What do we do, Dr. Niddle, with Allah's verses in the Quran, which talk about the creation of Adam by Allah's own hands? The doctor answers, I judge any theory, whether it is evolution, the Big Bang, Einstein's gravity, quantum mechanics, the atomic theory, or the nuclear theory. I judge them by their scientific evidence. I do not judge it by religious books. Otherwise it would be open to all possibilities. Another book will come along. Someone judges by a Hindu book, another by the Torah, and another one judges the theory by the Quran. This would never end. It is not acceptable to place the Quran in the same basket as books of false and distorted religions, such as the Hindu books, the Torah, and the Talmud. Isn't that right, doctor? He also says, it's one of two solutions. Either we tell him it is true that your book says so, but your book is wrong. Or we tell him don't interpret it this way. What people decided, be it Muslims, or even Christians or Jews, is that we shouldn't understand verses in this way. We should reinterpret them. Are the Jews and Christians an example for Muslims? And does the Quran, like their books, contain fallacies and clash with the mind and science? For you to ask us to do what they do, doctor. As I told you earlier, religious books, the Quran and others, talk about mankind, its origin, and its creation. So it's natural for people to ask, how do I understand these verses in light of what you say, O scholars? Is it possible to understand these verses in a way that makes them consistent with what science says? I said yes. Interviewed by reinterpreting the text, we reinterpret the parts that, if understood literally, would appear to contradict science. What does reinterpret the Quran mean? It means that the doctor considers the belief in the creation of mankind, as is evident from the Quran and Sunnah, and as was understood by the Ummah over the centuries, to be a superficial understanding. If we look at Quran verses superficially and literally, we see that this human was created completely independently from the rest of creation. Just like Hollywood's evolution films, Dr. Niddle talks about a primitive human, saying, this is the history of mankind. At first, he was a primitive being who didn't understand anything. He thought that everything around him was so frightening, and that there were many gods fighting in the sky and such. Then he began to develop slowly by himself, and started to think, I have a meaning, my existence has a meaning, my life has regulations. These other people, who are they? What do they say about me? These are the key differences with those who promote the idea of human evolution from lower organisms. 1. No methodology to distinguish authentic knowledge from myths. 2. No methodology in dealing with the Quran, and the audacity to delve into it without knowledge. And 3. No methodology to reconcile revelation and natural sciences. The result for them, human evolution, is a fact, and the only way to preserve the Quran is to reinterpret it in accordance with the fact of evolution, as did people of other religions. Perhaps the doctor should watch this episode and the previous ones to realize that the science, which he wants to reinterpret the Quran for, is nothing but Hollywood fantasies and scenarios with layers of darkness, as we have seen. An example of these reinterpretation was mentioned by one of the biology doctors, who, in an 8-minute video, repeated the phrase evolution is a fact 8 times, then said, so, who is Adam? Nobody knows the answer to that, and certainly I do not have the answer to that. But what I propose is that, and this is my personal opinion, that Adam that is mentioned in the Quran is a metaphor, an example of humanity in general. So the doctor thinks that Adam, peace be upon him, is only a metaphor, an example of humanity in general, not a real, independent, and specific being. She was asked again and she confirmed, saying, probably, that is why I say it is a metaphor, that Adam is a representative of a group of human beings that evolved. And when we say evolved from their previous ancestors, mostly we are talking about cognition development, abstract thinking, development of the conscious. So yes, very much so, it could be this groups of people who evolved with this higher mental capabilities and higher cognition, if you want to call it spirits. So, according to the doctor, Adam may be a metaphor for a group of humans that have evolved mental capabilities, cognition, and so forth. We may ask the doctor if Adam was a metaphor and not a real specific being. How would we understand the words of Allah Almighty, which can be translated as, "O children of Adam, do not let Satan deceive you, as he tempted your parents out of paradise," Quraan 7:27, and, "O Adam, this is surely an enemy to you and to your wife," Quraan 20:117, and many other verses, and many other authentic hadiths which talk about Adam, peace be upon him. Needless to say, those who dare to reinterpret the Quran this way are more daring on the Sunnah. What would keep the authors of esoteric Quran interpretations from interpreting the Quran as they wish, such that whoever can invent whatever meaning he desires, then claim that it is the intended meaning of the verses, rather than the clear, apparent meanings, like what happened with the esoteric movements in Islamic history? If Adam, whose story is detailed in the Quran, is just a symbol or a metaphor, then why can't heaven just be a metaphor, and hellfire be a metaphor, and the afterlife be a metaphor? Why can't even Allah Almighty be a mere metaphor? Remember, viewers, why the Quran is being reinterpreting like this, for mere myths, darkness upon darkness. The scientific responses on each of his arguments made by us and many others. He then topped off these evidences by saying, needless to say, no scientific theory can be presented as an alternative to the theory of evolution without serious scientific analysis, especially that the fossil record used by the evolution theory contains millions if not billions of fossils. A sentence phrased in a way that insinuates that there are millions or billions of fossils proving the myth. The fossil record used by the evolution theory. Aside from the extreme exaggerations in numbers, this record is full of fossils of human and animal skeletons similar to the well-known beings present currently among us. No one, not even the biggest propagators of the myth, claimed that they are an evidence for evolution. Rather, the discussion is around limited fossils, which we showed you today and in past episodes, with scientific detail and from their papers. What negates its indication to evolution? On the other hand, Dr. Al-Amari, who issued a series about immunity against atheism titled Anti-Atheism, has a problem in the definition of belief itself. He says, in fact, believing in anything calls for this jump, the leap, to believe in something without all the conclusive evidence. Such phrases and others imply that the belief in the existence of Allah and the unseen in general is probable rather than conclusive and certain. We fully explained the invalidity of this in the episode, Can We Have Certainty in the Existence of an Unseen God? And the episode, Can Science Prove Allah? And others from the journey of certainty, when human evolution is supported by strong scientific evidence. As Dr. Al-Amari says, while believing in Allah himself cannot be definitely proven and needs a leap into the void, it is no wonder that the Quran is reinterpreted to suit human evolution. As for Dr. Adnan Ibrahim, we explained his way of promoting the myth of evolution in general in the episode Why Do Some of Adnan Ibrahim's Followers Become Atheists? And today's episode debunks his claims about human evolution. In conclusion, I ask the Arabs who promote this myth, do you read scientific papers? Do you refer back to the original research and read it in its original language to verify the validity of the data and conclusions? Or do you get your information from the websites used by the followers of the myth to fool people and the graphics used by the populist myth promoters? Then you cite them as if they were trusted sources. Is it for the sake of these shabby myths that you want us to tamper with the interpretation of the Book of Allah Almighty and ignore authentic hadiths, When you return to the Quran to reinterpret its verses to suit this pseudo-science, as if the Quran is pliable or can be custom-made, are you by doing so conciliating between science and the Quran, or merely diminishing the Quran's reverence in Muslims' hearts by making it ill-defined and inferior? This Quran is mighty. It is truly a mighty book. No falsehood can approach it from the front or from behind. A revelation from the All-Wise, praiseworthy. QTM 4141-42. It's not confused with falsehood interpreted by falsehoods, nor subjugated to falsehood. It's a dominant book, ruling not ruled, leading not led. Indeed, this Quran is a decisive word, and is not to be taken lightly. QTM 8613-14. If you realize all this, brothers and sisters, then shake off the nonsense of pseudoscience, and listen, with your hearing and your whole being, to the words of your Lord Almighty, reminding you of your origin, in decisive words that are neither ambiguous nor obscure, such that it gives meaning to your life and builds upon it an ethical system. So you know that you are returning to Him, as He says, what can be translated as, O mankind, be mindful of your Lord who created you from a single soul, and from it He created its mate,